You're an adult now, so you're responsible for them. What's not to like? It's a memoir, and messiness ensues. Believe the hype. An unlikable protagonist, the Queen Joan Didion. A looming sense of insecurity. Live your dreams. Millennial angst. I like being alone. Possibly, probably. Captured the small moments that we experience alone. Same. In a new city, a new job, new experiences. Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. I'm Ray, What Ray Reads. Follow me on Instagram and What Ray Reads on TikTok as well, because she's on TikTok. Giving it a go. So if you're new here, we talk about books, book recommendations, what I'm reading and loving. Sometimes we talk about pop culture things. I also share vlogs of my life, but today we're here to sit down and talk about books. So I was inspired, because my birthday is coming up, I was inspired to do books that you could read in your 20s. So it's a reading list of books that I think you will enjoy or can give you some insight, inspiration, or make you feel less alone at a time when it's very confusing, you're having new experiences, you can feel very isolated and alone. So I thought, let's do a reading list of books to read in your 20s. And you may be thinking, Rachel, aren't you in your 30s? Well, yes, but I'm also forever 21, So I've picked a mixture of literary fiction books and memoirs, books that I read in my 20s and left a real impression on me, books I still think about to this day, or books that I think have a message in them, or a feeling, a vibe, or just books I would have wished I read in my 20s but I read later. So let's get into the books. So the first book is The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue, and we can always rely on the Irish girlies to come through with banging literary fiction. And I read this a couple of years ago now and was absolutely taken with the book, captivated with the characters. I laughed, I had a great time, but also I was like, oh, and also this book basically became my personality for a few months after I read it, and I was recommending it to everyone and anyone who'd listen. I was like, read this book, and now you're getting told to read it as well. We follow Rachel, who is a student in Ireland, and she works at a bookstore part-time, and she becomes enamoured with one of her colleagues, James, who's like a young lad who works there also. She's like, I think I'm in love with him. He's like an icon, a legend.
And she is the moment.
And James is like, Rach, love, I'm gay. The two quickly become like besties.
Let's be friends. Best friends.
And they become very important in each other's lives. They move in together and they're there for each other through the highs and the lows. And we follow their antics, dating, being messy, going out, drinking, just having those sort of uni days that people have in the 20s. And they're just living the best lives in Cork. Until one day, a writer and professor who, again, Rachel becomes a bit obsessed with, and he also has a reading at the bookstore they work at, and then they both become a bit obsessed with him, and he becomes involved in their lives in an odd way, and they're both sort of obsessed with him.
Why you so obsessed with me?
He's also married, but he kind of becomes entangled in their world, and it makes their sort of friendship get tested in a sense. But this book was just such a joy to read. It perfectly captures being that young, early 20s where everything's kind of exciting and you're out in the world on your own for the first time. You're finding the people that you enjoy being around, your likes and dislikes, your interests. But you're also realising the more sort of negative side effects of life, like heartbreak, losing friends, feeling lost. I'd describe this sort of as a coming of age, but it's also much more than that, and you'll just fall in love with the characters, so read it. Next is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, and you may be thinking, Rachel, that's a bit of a depressing choice, and I'm like, well, yes, but also there's like an important character in this book that I think you could benefit from reading. Although what's largely taken from this book's the exploration of mental health in the life of a young woman at the time when it was kind of taboo, not spoken about. Mental health was kind of pushed to the side and ignored, and it wasn't treated with any sort of sympathy or understanding. At the heart of the story is a young woman who's trying to find a footing in a new city, learning to be alone, sort of realising realising that things that she sort of wanted to experience aren't all the cut out to be. And it is largely hinted that the main character is Sylvia Plath, or it's a sort of semi-autobiographical version of her, and it holds up a mirror to society and the expectations placed on women at that particular period in time.
No ma'am.
The 1950s, and how they were trying to assert their place in a society that was fought and dominated by men.
You guys are clearly not doing patriarchy very well.
It's a difficult read at times because it is very heavy and it's dark, but I would say it's definitely a book I would recommend young women read, purely for its way that it exposes the struggles that women faced at the time and how isolated you can feel and the dangers you feel in a sense in a new city, a new job, new experiences. Yeah, this is one of my all-time favourite books, what's on the list anyway, and I remember it left a profound impact on me still to this day, and because it's one of my favourites, I like to collect like different editions of it, so this is one of the editions. Then I think I've got 2 or 3 other ones. If I see like, you know, a different edition, she's buying it. Next is All the Lovers in the Night by Maiko Kawakami. She's one of my favourite Japanese authors, and she sort of exposed me to a lot of different angles with which a female character can be looked at, and I like how her writing's very delicate and feminine, but she's talking about difficult things. Her books and her style of writing very much reminds me of Sofia Coppola's films, where they're oftentimes dealing with dark subject matter, but they also focus a lot on femininity and the female experience. But this book follows a lonely Japanese woman living in the city. She's in her 30s and she's living alone and feels sort of sheltered and like she's not living a life to the fullest. She's struggling to meet people. She feels like she's isolating herself, and there's a sense of her that knows that she's not living a life that she admires or feels comfortable with, and the job she does is from home, so she's very much sort of isolated in the comfort of her surroundings. Same. And she does have some connections with other women who are friends who she'll meet up with, but they're very sort of few and far, and she struggles to maintain or connect with men.
I mean,
until she develops a connection with an older man that she meets one day. Someone with a different lived experience who's older and has a different sort of view of the world. And the two develop an unlikely, unique bond, and they become very involved in each other's lives. I thought this book was really beautiful in how it looked at solitude and captured the small moments that we experience alone, the questions we ask ourselves. And also, as an introvert, I sometimes ask myself the same questions, where I'm thinking, because I enjoy spending time alone, I enjoy my own company, am I sheltering myself away from sort of different experiences? Possibly, probably, but it's kind of a fine line because I like being alone. But yet Maiko Kawakami has a very specific, stunning way of writing about female characters and their sort of inner worlds, and she explores themes of like independence in a society when women are sort of aging and not hitting these milestones. That's a familiar theme throughout her books, but I do like to see female characters that are sort of out there on their own and they're not attached to a romance, or the story's not pushed forward by sort of looking for a companion. It's just sort of out there in a world. But as the Pussycat Dolls said, next is Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, and this is another book that had a very profound impact on me when I read it a few years back, and it stayed with me for a long time. And we follow Martha, who's been dealing with a lot of mental health issues for most of her life, and she's never sort of gotten answers, and the root of her issues have never been given a diagnosis. Sorry, there's noise going on outside. What's going on? Seems like some sort of gardening's happening. She's married, and from the outside she seems like she's got a great happy marriage and a happy life, and her husband's supportive in a sense, but he doesn't really have that understanding of the way that she is and the way that her mind works. And so this starts sort of splintering the relationship, leading her to go on more of like an exploration of the trauma she faced as a child and at her early years, and what is the cause of the feelings that she's having. And we also follow her as she seeks help and tries to get to the root of the issue. And this book's very raw, a very realistic portrayal of mental health. and how unless we seek out help, nothing's really going to change, and how important that help is. And I really felt for the character of Martha, and the book left a real impression on me long after I'd finished it, so I highly recommend that. Next is Luster by Raven Lalani, a book I recommend a lot, but a book that I really loved, and I think it captures sort of millennial angst and the sort of messiness of your 20s really well. And we follow a 20-something young black woman living in New York City. She's working in like a publishing house, and it's a mostly white office. She doesn't connect with anyone. She feels like the job's dead end. She has dreams and ambitions to be an artist, but the grind of daily living, having to get multiple different jobs just to get by, is put sort of her dreams and ambitions of being an artist on the back burner, which I know a lot of people have struggles with. Unless you've got support, it can be really difficult to sort of live your dreams. And to counteract this, she's kind of got a destructive streak where she's sort of very casual in her relationships, and one day she meets a man who's 20 years her senior.
What am I, a child bride?
Named Eric, and he claims to be in an open marriage.
Sure, Jan.
Sure. And slowly, in a weird way, she gets drawn into their domesticated suburban life. She ends up becoming involved with the wife and the child, and she starts to see from the outside that this situation's very odd, and maybe it's not the best situation for her to be in.
Well, yes!
It's more so a distraction from her doing what she truly wants. It's sharp, it's funny, it's witty, and it also touches on race, class and gender in a very specific millennial way. And as I mentioned, one thing that it really captures well is how millennials are struggling to sort of find the footing. You know, they're not able to be reaching these milestones that are set out for us: house, family, relationships, secure job with good benefits and things. That's sort of starting to be a thing of the past, and there's like a looming sense of insecurity in your life the older you get. And I think it's a great read for if you're in your 20s, because you'll probably see yourself in the character, but you'll also see how someone handles things in a very unique way, shall we say. Next is Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson, and this is a love story between two black artists who are sort of coming of age in London, and the writing is very beautiful and poetic. It's very sensitive and descriptive, and it takes a look at the complexities of race and identity in London, growing up there, trying to sort of forge out your path to be an artist and push against what's expected of you as a young black man in society. But it also focuses on the exciting and new times of meeting new people, relationships, first loves. It's a very delicately written, introspective book that touches on masculinity and how men in society, particularly black men, are expected to act and how they're treated. And I think if you're in your 20s and you're walking that fine line between wanting to take out a new career prospect or take a leap, you'll see yourself through the character. And it's only a short book. I think it's like less than 150 pages, so yeah, read that book. Next is a memoir, Educated, by Tara Westover, and this is a memoir I read a few years back, but as with many of the books on this list, it left a real impact on me, and I'm still thinking about it to this day. It's probably one of the best memoirs I've read. And we follow the author Tara Westover, who was raised in rural Idaho, where her parents were Mormon survivalists who were kind of anti-government, anti-education, anti-medicine, and she grows up around these delusional ideas and anxieties and think the end of the world's sort of near. And in the book she explores her childhood, aspects of neglect and abuse. Then we follow her into her adolescence and adult years, where she seeks out alone education and realises the importance and is pulled towards it. And she leaves home, attends university, and her desire for knowledge and education and think in her own way pushes her to places she never thought was possible for someone like her. And ultimately this new path makes her realise that she has to kind of sever the ties of her family and the way they think, because it's very black and white white for them, and there's no nuance in there. And she's also dealing with the frustration and anger for what was kept from her as a child, and she basically has to go it alone to fulfill her ambitions. I absolutely loved this memoir, and I found it very beautiful in the way it highlights the importance of education and knowledge and allowing children to sort of question things and be exposed to different ways of thinking. You'll fly through it because you won't be able to put it down. Next is another book that's a new favourite, and that is Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion, the Queen Joan Didion. And this book was written in the late 60s, but it feels very contemporary and relevant when you're reading it. And we follow Maria, who's an actress in Hollywood, but she's having kind of a dry spell, and as she's aging, she's kind of getting pushed out.
The cheek, the nerve, the gall, the audacity and the gumption.
She's having issues with a marriage and a husband. There's infidelity happening. There's the anxieties of the daughter that they have, who's got a medical condition that requires full-time care at an institution. And it follows her frustrations and anger and her inability to feel like she can express it or she's listened to. And all of this sort of culminates in her feeling the need to want to escape.
Nah, fuck this, I'm out of here. Get that fire exit door, I'm off.
And it really juxtaposes this fake illusion of LA glitz and glamour and the realities of living in that world that essentially uses you and then throws you out.
Disgusting!
Like everyone says, it is a book that reads like it's ahead of its time. This character feels like it could be someone now living in our time. And the story also touches on themes of feminism, female agency, at a time when women didn't have the choice over their bodies and bodily autonomy in general. But it really works at drawing the curtain back on the illusion of Hollywood and the lie that they're sort of selling to people.
Not on my watch!
And the character Maria is an unlikable protagonist. At the time, she was probably seen as very unlikable, but in modern times, she's just more of a complex female character, and we follow her whilst she deals with self-medicating, infidelity, and just this deep sense of unhappiness in a life that she just can't keep locked in. Believe the hype. This book's iconic. Next, we've got Conversations with Friends by Miss Sally Rooney. You didn't think we could have a book reading list of books in your 20s without Miss Sally Rooney, did you? Of course not. And I'd say this book's a bit messier than Normal People, and it's more of a, you may like it or you may not type of book, so don't just think because you like Normal People you'll love this. But we follow Frances, who's a student living in Dublin. She's living with her best friend and one-time lover, Bobby, and if you thought they were codependent, staying together and living together, they also perform together in a spoken word poetry type group. And one night after the show, they meet a charismatic older couple called Melissa and Nick, who are sort of well-off and trendy and the sort of the opposite of what these two are, but they get drawn into their life and become sort of enamoured with them. And the more their friendship as a group develops, Frances realises she's starting to develop feelings for Nick, and messiness ensues and complications in the group start to come to a head. The kind of catapulted back into reality with, you know, the choices that you make as a young adult, and you're an adult now, so you're responsible for them.
No! God, please, no! No!
I found this book very messy but realistic, but I liked how Sally Rooney explored themes of social class, sexual politics and desire through the character of Frances, and she is the most rich character in the book, I'd say, so check it out. And then finally, I've got another memoir, and that is Just Kids by Patti Smith. And I read this about 10 years ago and I still think about it. It's a great memoir of an artist that's much more about their exploration of being an artist. It's about the importance of relationships as you develop as an artist. And the book essentially follows Patti Smith's life. It's a memoir. As she sort of grows up in New Jersey, leaves penniless and with just a dream to be someone in New York City. She struggled to get by, but she also found inspiration. She met a muse and a best friend and one-time lover, Robert Mapplethorpe, the photographer. But not only is this book about someone discovering themselves, but it focuses on the people you meet and the importance they place in your lives at specific times. Like, you may meet them for, you know, a short period, but they may have a strong impact on your life or your creativity, or they may connect you with someone that could change your life. It holds up a backdrop to Patti Smith's career and life and the interesting people she met while she was sort of prowling the Chelsea Hotel at a time where there was political unrest and there was a lot of people who were sort of coming up in the art world and the music world, and they all inspired and fed off each other. But all this really just lends itself to exploring the most important relationship in her life with Robert Mapplethorpe, who they stayed friends for the whole of their lives until his death. So yet this one's for the people who want to be inspired. They want to read a touching, impactful story of creatives and artists that started off as outliers of society but made space for themselves. And you're reading about someone who's lived a very colourful and interesting life. What's not to like? So yeah, these are your books. You better get started. But I think this is a really touching, heartfelt, tender, and there's also funny aspects to the reading list. There's a bit of everything in there, so I dare you not to like one. Let me know in the comments if you've got any books, or let other people know in the comments. I always check and see what you recommend. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, because remember, subscribing means you're an icon. So why wouldn't you do it? Do you not want to be an icon? So yeah, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!